Do you know who I am? Backfires on arrogant boss when an $800,000 project goes off the rail cause he, the once confident CEO, used to demanding respect, sat helplessly as his $800,000 project went out of hand in the dimly lit boardroom, tension in the air crackling. His haughty manner gave down, displaying a weakness he had never anticipated. The conference table was gleaming with a clean shine as the fluorescent lights buzzed quietly overhead. The crew convened for the critical project meeting, and the air was heavy with expectancy. Mr. Reynolds, the CEO, who was well known for his tendency toward power plays and decisiveness, was seated at the head of the table. Mr. Reynolds became progressively more irritated with his team's recommendations and criticism as the discussion went on. With every dismissive wave of his hand, his ego grew larger, believing that his vision would be the only factor leading the project to success. He roared, his voice brimming with conceit, as he silenced critics with a single sentence. "Do you know who I am?" Mr. Reynolds had no idea, though, that his arrogance would ultimately lead to his demise. Weeks into months, and the once perfect plan started to show flaws. Budgets were overrun, deadlines were missed, and team tensions reached an all-time high. Even with his best efforts to take command, Mr. Reynolds was unable to resolve problems that he could not understand. The pivotal moment occurred when a crucial project component abruptly failed, shocking the whole business. Stakeholders began to demand answers, and Mr. Reynolds found himself in a panic, trying to save his name as best he could. Following the catastrophe, Mr. Reynolds was obliged to face the fallout from his conceit. The once dominant CEO was brought down, had his swagger taken away, and had to face the truth about his own limits. He had to face the prospect of failure for the first time in his professional life. But amid the mayhem and sorrow, there was a ray of hope. Mr. Reynolds started to restore what was lost with persistence and humility, and he gained insightful knowledge about the value of teamwork, humility, and the real definition of leadership in the process. Mr. Reynolds confronted the future with a renewed sense of humility and resolve, prepared to meet whatever difficulties lay in his path, even knowing the road ahead would be difficult. Even with the weight of his blunders, Mr. Reynolds resisted giving up. He pulled up his sleeves and plunged headfirst into the difficult process of re-establishing credibility and confidence among stakeholders who had come to distrust his leadership as well as inside his team. As time went on, Mr. Reynolds deliberately tried to listen more than he spoke, to get advice from people with different viewpoints, and to face issues head-on with an open mind and a desire to learn. He swallowed his pride and devoted himself to self-improvement, seeking out mentors who might provide direction and encouragement. It was a slow but steady swing of events. His staff started to trust and appreciate Mr. Reynolds more as he showed them his newfound humility and commitment to them. They put in a lot of effort together to solve the problems that had beset the project, coming up with creative fixes and strengthening their connections in the process. Mr. Reynolds experienced a resurgence of purpose and desire with every minor triumph. He came to see that genuine leadership was about motivating others to reach their greatest potential and become their best selves, not about exercising authority or requiring submission. So, armed with humility and a fresh understanding of the need of teamwork, Mr. Reynolds persevered, determined to show that redemption was possible despite what seemed to be overwhelming odds. The project started to make headway again as the months went by. Deliverables surpassed expectations, milestones were reached, and team spirit surged as they united to achieve a shared objective. And even if the path ahead remained difficult, Mr. Reynolds approached it with a newfound sense of purpose and confidence. Ultimately, the voyage had changed him in ways he never would have thought possible. After going through a trial by fire, Mr. Reynolds became a resilient, empathetic leader who was no longer characterized by his conceit or his prior transgressions. Even if his previous scars will always serve as a warning against arrogance, they also served as evidence of the human spirit's boundless potential and the strength of redemption. Mr. Reynolds was coming to more fully embrace the values of empathy and humility with every day that went by. His team was no longer just a group of people to be controlled. Rather, they were valued partners whose special knowledge and viewpoints made the project possible. The days of authoritarian orders and unbridled ego were behind, and in their stead was a leader who guided with empathy and understanding rather than coercion. He gave his team members the space and opportunity to voice their worries and goals, and to become more self-assured in their job. Their mutual respect and trust allowed the team to reach its full potential. Every part of their job was imbued with a spirit of camaraderie, and ideas were freely exchanged. With each other at their sides at all times, they tackled obstacles head-on, without letting fear or uncertainty hold them back. And as the project drew closer to its end, Mr. Reynolds couldn't help but feel proud of his team and himself for having accomplished such an amazing journey of development and transformation, rather than just for his personal achievements. They had come out of the storm of misfortune stronger, more seasoned, and closer than ever. Most significantly, though, Mr. Reynolds had discovered that real leadership was about encouraging others to do greater things rather than sitting at the top and enjoying the accomplishment. And he realized he had discovered his true calling: to inspire, uplift, and lead with humility and grace. As he saw the faces of his team members, each of whom exuded a feeling of satisfaction and purpose. Therefore, rather than standing as a conqueror, when the last bits of the project fell into place and everyone could see the results of their labor, Mr. Reynolds stood as a servant leader, humbled by the journey that had led them to this point and thankful for the chance to improve the lives of those around him. Because in the end, what counted most were the connections made, the lessons discovered, and the leadership legacy that would last long after the project was over, not the scope of the endeavor or the degree of its success. And in that sense, Mr. Reynolds realized that he had really accomplished something extraordinary, not just for himself, but also for everyone he had impacted along his journey. Mr. Reynolds maintained his vigilance throughout the project's final stages, making sure that no information was missed and that any possible roadblocks were resolved. He was aware that unless the project was finished and delivered to the satisfaction of all stakeholders, success could not be assured. The crew was growing more and more excited about the project's completion with every day that went by. They had given the project their all, conquering many obstacles and disappointments in the process. And now, as the finish line approached, they could feel a wave of satisfaction and achievement pass through them. On the day of the project presentation, stakeholders gathered in the boardroom, nervously anticipating the conclusion of months of hard work and commitment. With a cool and serene manner, Mr. Reynolds stood at the front of the room, prepared to make the last pitch. His voice resounded with passion and conviction as he talked, illuminating the project's development from inception to conclusion. He emphasized the group's extraordinary work, the creative fixes they had come up with, and the project's potential to completely change the company. And when the presentation came to an end, there was a sense of suspense among the participants as they anticipated the decision. However, Mr. Reynolds realized their efforts had not gone in waste when the cheers and awards began to come in. The project had been a huge success, demonstrating the strength of leadership, perseverance, and cooperation. Following the lecture, Mr. Reynolds experienced intense emotion as he thought back on the path that had led them to this point. He reflected on the early stages of the endeavor, when ambiguity and doubt had threatened to impede their advancement. He recollected the difficulties they had encountered, the barriers they had surmounted, and the ties of friendship and unity that had kept them going throughout it all. He was incredibly grateful, though, not just for his team, whose steadfast commitment and support had made the unthinkable possible, but also for the chance to guide them on this amazing path of development and discovery. Mr. Reynolds realized that his team's achievement was a result of everyone's dedication and hard work, not just his own leadership, as he observed the pleased expressions on their faces. And even as they celebrated their victory as a group, he realized that their path was far from done, and that they would continue to accomplish greatness in the days and years to come if they remained humble, resolute, and had a common goal. After the project was presented successfully, Mr. Reynolds found himself thinking back on the things he had discovered along the way. He came to see that genuine leadership was about motivating others to reach their greatest potential and fulfill their own potential, not about imposing power or demanding obedience. Mr. Reynolds assumed his position as CEO with a fresh humility and sense of purpose after gaining this newfound insight. He placed a high priority on openness, cooperation, and communication within the company, creating a climate in which each person's opinion was respected and their voice was heard. The business prospered under his direction, setting new records and reaching previously unheard of levels of prosperity. More significantly, though, Mr. Reynolds saw the good effects his leadership had on people in his immediate vicinity, a sense of fulfillment, empowerment, and community that pervaded every area of the company. Mr. Reynolds was overcome with thankfulness for the ability of adversity to transform as he reflected on his path from arrogance to humility. He had learned his genuine calling as a leader, one that was based in service to others rather than ego or ambition, through the ups and downs of the $800,000 project. Thus, Mr. Reynolds realized he was living out his destiny to inspire, encourage, and lead with humility and grace as he carried on directing the business with honesty and compassion. Because in the end, what counted most were the lives that were touched, the hearts that were elevated, and the leadership legacy that would last for future generations, not the awards or the accomplishments. Mr. Reynolds persisted in his resolve to lead with grace and humility as the months went by. He persisted in cultivating an environment of cooperation and creativity within the company, giving his team members the freedom to own their work and fervently follow their hobbies. Under his direction, the business started new projects, entered uncharted territory, broke down boundaries, and established new benchmarks for the sector. But even in the thick of the chaos that comes with commercial success, Mr. Reynolds never lost sight of the individuals who really made it all possible. He took the time to get to know his staff members personally, celebrating their accomplishments, listening to their worries, and offering assistance when required. He understood that effective leadership involved more than just making difficult choices and achieving financial targets. It also involved developing bonds with subordinates, earning their trust, and creating a feeling of community inside the company. And as time passed, Mr. Reynolds observed the results of his efforts in his staff members' smiles, their enthusiasm, and their steadfast commitment to the business and its goals. He was aware that he had improved not only the company's performance, but also the lives of those under his leadership. However, the community at large, rather than the boardroom or the financial sheet, may have been the best testimonial to Mr. Reynolds' leadership. He impacted the lives of many people in need via his charitable endeavors and dedication to corporate social responsibility, creating a legacy of kindness and giving that would last for years to come. Mr. Reynolds was filled with appreciation for the ability of self-reflection and personal development to bring about transformation as he reflected on his path from conceit to humility. He had discovered that serving others was the genuine path to success, rather than pursuing selfish glory, and it was this insight that led him to discover his true purpose as a leader. Mr. Reynolds saw that he was changing people's lives as he went along, not just in the economic sector, but also in their hearts and minds, as he led with honesty and compassion. Ultimately, what truly defined him were the lives he had impacted and the leadership legacy he had left behind, not the titles or awards. Mr. Reynolds' influence went beyond the boundaries of his organization as he carried on providing ethical and compassionate leadership. He developed into a highly sought-after speaker and mentor who gave advice and insights to budding leaders all around the world. He encouraged people to embrace service, empathy, and humility in their own leadership journeys by setting an example. But Mr. Reynolds never lost sight of the lessons he had learned along the way. Even as he basked in the glory of his achievements, he understood that developing into a genuine leader was a lifelong process that called for ongoing introspection, development, and a readiness to take lessons from both achievements and setbacks. Knowing that he had improved the lives of many others, Mr. Reynolds experienced a deep feeling of fulfillment as his career came to an end. He had changed from an egotistical, haughty employer to a kind leader with a strong sense of purpose and a desire to improve the world. Therefore, reflecting on his path from the disastrous $800,000 project that had brought him low to the leadership legacy he had established over time, Mr. Reynolds was aware that his life had been worthwhile. He had the courage to face his own frailties and inadequacies, and as a result, he had become stronger, smarter, and more compassionate than before. Ultimately, what mattered were the lives he touched and the impact he had on the globe, not the enterprises he had managed or the money he had made. Mr. Reynolds grinned as he handed the torch to the upcoming generation of leaders, certain that they would lead and inspire people for many years to come, because he knew that the future was in capable hands. Because, in the end, what truly distinguished a person was not how much money they had or how many awards they had on their resume, but rather how much of an influence they had on other people. And in that sense, Mr. Reynolds understood that he had accomplished unimaginable greatness, a leadership legacy that would go on long beyond his passing.